Hey there everyone, I am Chris, this is Simply Classic, and today we are going to make the Vespera tote by RLR Creations. Now in our last video we made the accompanying pouch. There's actually two patterns in that one pattern. You get the pouch and you get the bag. And we made it out of this leather and cotton combination. We did it all on the domestic machine. Came out super cute, so if you have not seen that video yet, go back and take a look. It is a great companion piece for this pouch. So we're going to start out by going over pattern pieces. The entire bag this time is going to be made out of this cobalt leather. So the bag kind of calls for a different color, like a color combination like you see here. What I've decided to do is to keep that on the pouch only, and on the bag I'm going to make the bag a solid color and then actually quilt a little bit of it. So I'm going to show you how we're going to do that quilting as well. So let's get started. Okay, let's start by going over pattern pieces and prep, because there is some prep on this bag. So the very first piece we have is our main panel left, and it has a marking here, a cutout that you need to go ahead and cut out for your strap connector so that you know exactly where to put it. So what I did on this was, another thing too, is that it has two marks here in the seam allowance on this diagonal line. So you're going to want to make those marks on the bag. I went ahead and kind of drew a rough idea of where the strap connector is going to go. And then since we're quilting, I'm actually going to, or I already did, put some, this is just anti-soft and stable on the back outside the seam allowances. So do all that with that specific piece, and I have got two of those pieces. Then we have pattern piece B, which is our main panel right side. And this has the same thing as the pouch, where you've got this tiny little cutout here that you need to do. Also, it has two place marks here, and this is for a pocket that we're going to put in. So I went ahead and marked those in my seam allowance, went ahead and made my little cutout, and then also put the strap connector piece, drew that in on both of these pieces. Again, put some anti-soft and stable in the back. I just glued that on, and that is for both pieces. You've got two right-hand side pieces. Then piece C is the stabilizer for this. So because we're using the foam, I've already attached that stabilizer, so I'm not going to put anything in addition to. Piece D is that front slip pocket I was talking about, and it's just on one side, just on the front. So I have two pocket pieces, and I put some woven interfacing on the back. Piece E is your connector tabs, and these connector tabs are going to go, we kind of have a little decorative piece on the front to cover these connector tabs. So we have the actual connector tab piece that we're going to fold and cut and all that. I drew a line down the center and put some double-sided tape. And then we have the piece F, which is the connector piece that's going to go over that piece, which is that kind of shape we drew in on those main panels. So we have 4 piece Fs, which are these kind of funky looking pieces. And then we have 1 piece E that we will end up folding and cutting. We then have our bottom panel, and this is piece G. And I went ahead and put Decaville Heavy on the back outside the seam allowances. Piece H is our side panels. And on the side panels, I went ahead and put some Decaville Light on the back of these. We also have little cutouts here because we're going to kind of pleat these corners. You have 2 main pieces and you have 2 lining pieces, and the lining pieces have some woven interfacing on the back. So that is our side panels. We then have piece I, which is our interior main panel. And this is, we're going to cut 2 of these, and this is what it looks like. It's got woven interfacing on the back. So I have 2 of those. And that's one of the pieces you cut on the fold. We then have piece J, which is our interior slip pocket. We have 2 of those, again with woven interfacing on the back. We have piece K, which is another interior pocket piece, a little bit smaller. So I went ahead and cut 2 of those as well and have some woven interfacing on the back of those. Piece L is our zipper pocket, our interior zipper pocket. We have the lining top, or basically the top piece. So the top piece is a little bit longer than the bottom piece. The width is the same, but L is the top, M is the bottom, and you can see that they're a little bit different height here. So L and M. Then piece N is our zipper pocket facing. Now I decided that I was going to do that, actually use an overlay piece. So instead of cutting a facing piece that I would use in fabric and turn, I'm actually cut an overlay piece. So I'll show you how to use that. And then we have piece O, which is the handles. And on the handles, I went ahead and cut them out, drew a line down the center, put double-sided tape down the center. I also put a piece of small double-sided tape on each side because I'm going to use my shape cutter once I fold these to get a nice rounded edge. So we have 2 of these. And then piece P is our crossbody handle, and I actually have that in another spot. It's got some glue and is drying. So because I have leather, I can't get a full 55 inches. So I'm actually going to use pieces there and kind of make a little decorative handle with some hardware. The other thing we need is obviously a zipper for our interior zipper pocket. And then for hardware, we're going to need 4 rectangle rings. I'm using some purse feet, so you'll need some purse feet, obviously a zipper pull. You're also going to need a couple of magnetic snaps, which I have here. And then you're going to need grommets. Now, don't be intimidated by these grommets. We have these really cool new push together grommets. They're metal. All you need is a shape cutter or a 1/2 inch punch. You'll be able to punch the hole, and you just take the front of this, and I'll show you how to do it. The front of this grommet, you put it in, you put the back in. You're gonna just lightly tap it with a mallet, and they're in. There's no screws, they're super simple. So we sell them in packs of 2 and in packs of 8. So whichever you prefer, but I highly recommend you check them out. My testers love them. And then we're gonna need a couple of spring or gate rings, O-rings. And these are the rings that have the little spring gate on them. And that's just how the crossbody handle is going to be put on, and also it's going to hold your size in. All right, and that's all the pieces. So we're going to start with the handles and get going. Okay, we've got our handles and we have our connector tabs here. We're going to peel the backing off the tape on the connector tabs. And we're going to fold the back into the center. Now, you definitely want to make sure that your 2 long edges meet here in the back. We're not going to sew this quite yet. We're going to put our connectors on, our rectangle rings, and then from there we will put it on the bag once we get everything else done we need to do, and deal with it there. But I am going to cut it in half. And then since we have 4, I'm also going to fold it and cut it in half one more time. We can go ahead and put our rectangle rings on. And I'm just going to put a clip to hold this. And we're going to set these aside. Put them on the bag in just a few minutes. So on the handle, go ahead and remove the backing of the tape. And then we're going to fold this to the center. Now in this case, you want to leave a little space between the folds so that when we fold it again, the fabric will have a place to go when we fold it. So I'm just going to make sure my ends match up. And just make sure you don't pull when you fold this over. A lot of times people want to pull here, and you're not pulling, you're just laying this down and just patting it down. Okay, I'm going to do the other side. Peel this long backing off the tape. And then we're going to leave a nice space there for folding. Okay, so see the space. We've got a good space right there. And I'm doing that all the way down. Making sure my ends meet. Okay. Then from here, we're going to fold it again. And by leaving that space in between when we fold it, these two edges will collapse into each other and we'll be able to match up the folded edges nicely. Now, I'm not using any kind of hardware on the end of these straps. Instead, I'm going to use a leather punch to punch a nice curved edge, and then I will edge paint it. So before I sew, I want to make sure that I get that edge punched in. I'm going to use just a small piece of double-sided tape here so that I can tape these edges down. What I don't want to happen is as I punch that the punch itself makes these two pieces kind of go off from each other. So let me go ahead and grab another piece of double-sided tape. I'm going to put it right here on the edge. And then that way, when I fold this over, I can match up those edges really nice. And now when I punch, I'm not going to have any gaps or anything there that's going to cause the punch to go off center. Okay, so I'm able to line it up. I'm going to go ahead and punch these edges, and then we'll come back and sew it. So this is the leather punch that I use, and you just put it on the edge and hit it with a mallet, and it punches a nice rounded edge. So as we sew, we're going to actually stitch around this curved edge, and then when I'm through, I will put some edge coat and then some base coat on this, and it's going to look really nice. So I'm going to start on the folded edge just above my first curve. I'm going to come down, immediately go around the curve, and then stitch this open edge closed. And that way I'll go ahead and secure this, and then of course when I get to the other side will be secured as well. I'm going to do this at a 1/8 inch seam allowance, and I am going to use my edge guide. When I go around these curves, I'm going to hand sew it. I'm going to just take it one by one. get around on the other edge, and then I'll be able to stitch up. Now I'm going to pull the thread through the back, and we'll tie it off in the back, and then when we attach this to the bag, we'll just make sure that that thread is in the back here when we fold this over, and you won't be able to see the knot at all. So I'm just going to pull that thread through to the back, tie it off. I will go ahead and just singe this knot to make sure it stays. And then, like I said, when we attach this to the bag, we'll pull this side up, and that way it'll hold that knot. Okay, so here's the first handle. Like I said, I'm going to edge coat, base coat, and then I will also do the other handle, and we'll move on to the next step. All right, we're going to start by marking the lines to quilt, and the pattern that I'm going to do is just going to be a V pattern that's going to kind of follow this angle here. And I'm doing a V because we have a V here at the end, and I just think it'll all kind of tie into each other. So the first thing we want to do is from this point here, we want to draw a line straight down following this angle. And I'm going to mark that at right at a 1/2 inch seam allowance, or a 1/2 inch, which is going to be the seam allowance there when we put it all together. So we're going to be folding it at right at a 1/2 inch seam allowance. So I am actually going to mark it at 5/8 because that's where we're going to do the stitching. We're not going to do the stitching on the fold where we fold it. We're going to do the stitching right on 1/8 of an inch in. So now from there, I'm going to mark 1 inch lines all the way down, or I'm going to mark 4 of them. So 1, 2, I'll have 4 all together. 3. Now we want to do the same thing going this way, but we don't exactly know the angle. So we're going to use our other piece to help us determine that. So I'm just going to take this piece, I'm going to fold it so that the tops line up, the bottom down here lines up, and now I know the angle. I don't want to put the ruler right against the edge. I'm going to put the ruler a 1/2 inch in, so essentially where the foam ends. So when you do it, you can just kind of hold this piece down, hold this up, and essentially we're wanting to start right about at the very edge of this point. and you'll find that's about a 1/2 inch underneath this piece. So line that up there. Let's see. So this raw edge is on my 1/2 inch mark on my ruler. So I'm going to pull this aside, and you will see that this ruler just about matches up with that mark. It looks like I'm off about 1/8 of an inch, so actually I'm going to come in a little bit further. So let me line this up, and instead of putting it on the 1/2 inch, I'm going to put it on 5/8. And that matches up perfect. So I'm going to go ahead and mark my line, and you can see that where this intersects is right at that point there. So from here, every inch, we can put this piece aside now, we don't need it, but every inch we're going to mark another line. So inch, and I'm just going to put 4. Now, the key to this is that we're not going to sew this first line yet. That's going to be done after we attach our pocket and we do our top stitching. If you don't put a pocket in, that line there is going to be basically the way you connect the two sides together. So for, to get, that's why we're not stitching it, but if you don't care about that, don't worry about it. Just don't stitch that line, this one line here, but you're going to stitch from here down, and then you'll do each other one of these points. So I'm just going to start right here at this point. I'm not going to back stitch, pull my threads through, and then I will come down here, back stitch, and then I'll start over here, back stitch, up, down, back stitch, etc. So I'm going to make sure I'm right on target. And then up here, I will pull this through. And I'm just going to put a tiny little piece of double-sided tape on that to hold it down. Make sure that knot doesn't come out. Okay, so that's our first line, and now we're going to start on the second line over and go ahead, come up, turn, and come back down. So go to the point, turn, come down. So there is all of the markings, or all of the quilting. And if you put just a little bit of water on this, you'll be able to get those lines off. I'm just going to kind of wipe them for right now. But I'm not going to take this mark off. What I'm going to do is I have these 2 marks where my pocket is going to go. And when you line them up, you can go ahead and mark that on your main part of your bag. You want to take your pocket piece and you're going to line that up, but you will see the pocket is bigger or longer than these 2 marks, and that's okay. So we want to center it, and then I'm going to transfer these marks to the pocket because we're only going to stitch between those marks. So before I clip, I'm just going to go ahead and put a little mark here and here, and then just move that up and clip it. So don't stitch from end to end, you're going to stitch from dot to dot. And you're going to use a 1/2 inch seam allowance here. So at this point I am going to backstitch. So now we're going to take our pocket and just kind of finger press this and then turn it to the wrong side. And your stitch line for your quilting should be right along that edge. I'm going to top stitch this, which is going to create part of this quilting line, and then we will finish it off when we sew the rest of the bag together. But you only want to do it in between your places where your pocket is. So I'm going to mark here. I'm going to stitch from there to here. Don't go beyond where you previously stitched. You can see you should have a spot here where this is unstitched. This is where you're going to top stitch from. I'm going to pull my threads through. Do not backstitch. And this is essentially starting to create that last line of quilting that we need. Go ahead and pull these threads through, and I'm actually going to go as far as pulling this pocket up and pulling them through here to the underneath of the pocket. So that way I don't even see them on the inside of my pocket. I'm just going to pull this apart a little bit, enough to get that first stitch out. And then I'm going to tie them off here. And there's part of our quilt. So we're going to end up picking up where we left off there to go to this top point, and same thing going down, and that will finish off that quilting line. But before we do that, we want to put the other pocket piece on our front piece. So let's set this aside for just a minute. And we have the same situation on this front piece. We have 2 marks here. We're going to go ahead and put this pocket on, lay it down, and then we're going to mark where we're going to sew. So from here to here. And then I'm going to clip this on, and I'm only going to stitch between my dots. And you're going to stitch using a 1/2 inch seam allowance. And you are going to backstitch. from here, we want to open the pocket, but don't fold it back. You're just going to open it up, kind of finger press it down, and then we're going to go back and take our main piece and we're going to line up our pocket pieces and line up the bag piece. Now, I am going to put, let's see, you can put a little bit of double-sided tape. You obviously don't want to put it across your pocket. You can put a little bit up here and a little bit down here to help hold all this. I'm actually going to put it underneath. And then continue folding this over so it's nice and tight. And you're going to have a little bit of a tail here. You can just cut that off. Actually, I can just peel the backing off this tape that I used to hold that knot down. Go ahead and pull that tight. Okay, we're going to match up the pockets. So I'm just making sure everything matches. I'm going to go ahead and put a few clips on. And before we sew that, you can top stitch here on this pocket. I think I am going to do that just to help hold it down. So let me do that first. And I'm not going to top stitch beyond the spot where I stop stitching. So don't start top stitching at the end of your pocket. You're going to stitch basically between the dots. So from here, let's go ahead and line up these pocket pieces. And what we're going to do is make sure that the bag lines up perfectly like this. And then we'll go ahead and do our final stitching here to hold this together. The stitching or where you're going to line up is a 1/2 inch. So you can actually draw a line a 1/2 inch to make sure that you're going to line it up properly. So it's a 1/2 inch away from the side of the bag. Go ahead and do that. Because you want to make sure that's matching before we sew this pocket together. All right, moving along. Make sure the bottom edge of the bag matches. Sure the top edge matches, and you will see that these pocket pieces should match as well. So flip this piece over and go ahead and clip your pocket pieces. Now, when you stitch your pocket pieces, you're going to pull this up here and you're going to be able to stitch right up to the edge, come down, around, and then as you come up this side, do the same thing. Pull this back, and then you'll be able to stitch. So I'm actually going to start over here from this side. Close the pocket. you will notice that your pocket sticks out a little bit here at the end. So when you come down to stitch this side, don't come all the way down to the bottom. You're going to basically cut it off and you're going to stitch about like this to cut this pocket. If you want to draw a line there to help you see where that is, you can certainly do that. So you can just go like this. Make sure that that ruler isn't showing, and then draw that line. So now when I get to this point, I will turn and finish up, and then we'll cut the rest of that pocket off. So I'm going to turn, I'm going to flip this back up. I'm also going to flip it, the bottom here up, so that I can stitch to the end of the pocket. Now don't overstitch when you stitch this pocket closed, because if you do, you will see it in the front. So this is what we have so far. This is what the back looks like. We're just going to cut this part off. Okay, and that is going to be our slip pocket. So now we need to finish stitching. We're going to pick up where we left off here on the top stitching. We're going to go up to this point that we quilted, and then we're going to turn and just stitch this little part right here closed. We do the same thing at the bottom, pick up where we left off and stitch to the bottom. Now you can either hold this closed, you can put a little double-sided tape behind there. I'm just gonna kind of hold it, get my needle in, and it's not a very long distance, so I think I'll be all right. I'm going to make sure I go ahead and end up in the same hole, and then I'm going to pull those threads through, tie them off, and then we're going to do the same thing on top. And I'm going to turn and come up this little side piece here. I'm going to pull this thread through to the back, since it's completing our quilting stitch. And there we have our quilted front with our hidden slip pocket. So I'm going to do the other side. I'm not going to put the slip pocket in, although you certainly could. You could have two slip pockets. I'm going to do the quilting. Again, not doing this stitch until I actually stitch it on the bag. I'm going to do this one, and then same thing, these, and then I'm going to attach the front. It's going to be much simpler. You're just going to attach it, just like we did here, only without the pocket, stitch up, and then front and back will be done. So I'm going to do that, and then we'll come back. Both the pieces are completed, and you can see it's really hard to tell which one has the pocket. It's this one right here. It's very cool. So we're going to put the strap connectors on next, and I'm going to use a little double-sided tape to help me with that. So the first thing I'm going to do is just baste the edges, just the bottom here closed, because you're not going to see that. It's going to be behind these uniquely shaped pieces. So that will just help me keep it closed to start. From there, I'm going to put a little bit of double-sided tape on the back of the connector. And we are going to measure down from the top of the bag the amount that we're given in the pattern. So let me do that. And then in addition, we want to make sure that these marks are 6 inches apart, which they are. We're going to line up the top of the ring, which is a little different, to the dot. Okay, so we're going to make sure that's lined up and in. Now, when you look at this, you can see where your shape is drawn in. That looks a little bit low to me because the points are way up here and I'm not going to be able to sew that with the connector. So I'm going to move this up a little bit. And now I can see those points and I should be able to get around that with my machine to get into those points. All right, so we're going to sew this on, and she suggests sewing a box and then an X in the box. I'm going to sew across and just down and over, just basically sew a square. I'm not going to worry about sewing an X. I think that will be enough because I am going to put a rivet in the middle, and I don't want to put a rivet in and then have it break some of the stitches when I punch the hole. So I'm going to get as close as I can to the connector. And then when I turn and stitch down, I'm going to cover the connector because I don't want to have the project be messed up. Either the leather or the connector be scratched. I am going to pull this through to the back so I can tie it off. And actually, if you start in a lower position, you can backstitch. I like to start against the connector though, so I know how close I can get to it. Okay, and then I'm going to stitch back up. I'm going to end in the same hole I started. I will go ahead and pull that through, tie it off. Put just a little bit of tape over that knot. Okay, now from here, we're going to take our connector piece. It's going to go over that. And I'm going to put some double-sided tape to help me hold it down on the back. And I'm actually going to use, I'm thinking about it, I'm going to use 1/8 of an inch. I'm not going to put it right on the, where I'm going to stitch, but I'm going to put it just inside of that seam allowance, just to kind of help me hold it down. I think if you just put one in the middle, that this will shift as you sew it, and we certainly don't want that to happen. So go ahead and kind of outline. Just put one up here. All right, let's peel the backing off all of this tape. We will place it on top of the strap connector, roughly where we drew our lines. Now we want it to line up and be straight and look good, so okay. So from here we're going to stitch around this shape at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. Now, one thing I'm going to do too is I'm going to put little dots. We've used the dot trick before where you turn. So about 1/8 of an inch away from every corner that I want to turn, I'm going to put a dot, and I'll make sure I stitch to that dot. Don't go beyond it, and that way I know I will be turning in the right spot. So you see all my little dots. I think I'm going to start here. Go ahead and put my needle in at my dot. I'll make sure that I stop right at my dot. And turn. Mark here, stitch, and then again protect my leather and my hardware. And I'm going to make sure I start or stop in the same hole that I started. And also hold my thread through the back. Okay, once again I'm going to tie off these threads and then just stick it underneath the double-sided tape. So now once you get all of your marks off, this should look really nice. So if you're using cork or leather, faux leather, you're going to do the connectors this way. If you are using cotton, then you're gonna have a piece that's larger than this that you're going to use to create a piece that you can sew right sides together and turn, and then that way you'll have a nice finished edge. Okay, so I'm going to do the same thing with all the other strap connectors. We have 3 more. Go ahead and get them on, and then the last thing I'm going to do is put a rivet here to hold it down, and I'm going to put the rivet pretty close to the dot because, or the corner here, because I want to get it through my strap connector, and so it's going to have to go for me right about there. If your strap connector is further down, you might be able to go more in the middle, but that's not going to work for me. So anyway, I'm going to get all that done and then we'll come back. Okay, all of my strap connectors are on, and I decided to put the rivet up above this decorative strap connector. Just felt like it would hang on to the actual strap connector a little bit better. So from here, we're going to go ahead and put the bottom on. We're going to stitch, get it together here. So we are going to turn this so the seam allowance is going towards the bottom, and we're going to top stitch. We're going to repeat for the other side. So we're going to make sure again that the seam allowance is going towards the bottom, and we're going to top stitch. So before we continue, I'm going to put some feet on this bag, and I think the bottom is small enough that I can get away with just putting 4 on here. I'm going to measure 3/4 of an inch in from each of these side seams. So basically where I'm seeing the side of this front to come together is where I'm going to measure from. And draw a line. Do the same thing over here. And then I'm going to draw a line 1 inch from the side of the decoville. And where these lines intersect is where I'm going to put the feet. So I'm going to get those installed and then we'll move on. The feet are installed, and the next step is to prep the side panels. So we need to close these darts. So to do that, you're just going to fold these little edges, right sides together. We're going to do that on both panels. And then we're going to stitch them. And you're just going to use 1/4 of an inch seam allowance here. So these are going to be the side panels. We need to go ahead and find the center at the bottom here. Go ahead and mark it. And then on the main part of our bag, we're going to find the center of the bottom panel. We're going to match those centers up when we clip everything together. So let me see here. Match my bottom seams. All right, let's set one of these aside for just a minute. We're going to open this up and we're going to put this right sides together. Match your center seam or your center notch. And then bring this around. Match your tops. And then you're going to clip the rest of this. Now, you're going to want to poke these out as you do it, and then all this will fit in a lot better. You always, and we're probably going to need to clip, and remember, you always clip your straight edge. So in our case, the straight edge is not the gusset, it's the actual bag. So let me see. It actually matches really good, so let's hold off and just clip. All right, we can do the same thing over here. Go ahead and match the top. We'll bring this all the way around and then make sure these bottoms match. So it looks like I'm off a little bit. Let me see if I can see where that is. I might have to clip after all. Okay, I think that's okay. So from here, I'm going to, with the side up facing me, I'm going to stitch, starting at the top and coming around and going all the way to the bottom. So you see I have the side panel facing me. So I'm going to have to stand the bag up some to get this to fit in. And I am going to clip a little bit of the bag itself, not the gusset, but the bag, to get this curve to fit in, okay? I'm going to go ahead and make a couple clips here as well. So there is our seam inside, good to go. Let's look at it from the right side. And because of the pleats, you see how it kind of comes out a little bit? That's kind of the design of the bag. It's pretty cool. Love it. Okay, so I'm going to do exactly the same thing and put the other side on. So once both sides are sewn on, we need to cut the seam allowances back to 1/4 of an inch. All right, I'm going to cut the other one back, and then I'm going to turn the bag. So here is the exterior all put together and done. And see how these sides kind of poke out a little bit? I think that looks really neat. And then we have our little hidden slip pocket. Don't even know it's there. So we're going to set the exterior aside for just a minute and move on to the interior. I have pieces J and K here, which is slip pockets, and I'm just going to put them right sides together. We will clip, and then we're going to stitch the top of both. So go ahead and do that. On the smaller of the two, which is K, we're going to turn this. I'm just going to kind of finger press it. And then we're going to top stitch across the top. We're going to find the center of this. So I'm just going to put a seam, just a finger press seam down the center. We're going to place this pocket. We're going to open this one up here. I'm going to place this on top of one of the pieces. And we're going to stitch around, come up the center seam, come back down, and then go back around. We're just going to base this on, so we're going to use the 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. from here, we're going to flip this top back over, and we're going to stitch down both sides and just a little bit here at the bottom so that we can turn. I'm actually going to just stitch the sides and then I'll fold the bottom edge in. I think it'll be a little easier to do that. So let's stitch, and then at this point we're using the full 1/2 inch seam allowance. I'm going to trim some of this back here just because we have some bulk, because we have the pocket on top. So I'm just going to cut this off, but I'm not going to cut it off all the way to the top. I'm just going to stop at this stitch, and we'll fold this stitch or these seam allowances in, kind of like what we do when we fold our folded slip pockets. And I'll show you how to do that. It's a little different because we have 2 lines of stitching now. So what you're going to do is you're going to fold on the top seam, or on the top stitches, and then you're also going to fold on the side stitches. Okay, so you're making yourself a nice corner here. Go ahead and hold that with your thumb and your finger, and then we're just going to push that out. And then I'm going to use my turning tool to push the last little bit out. Okay, and then we have that nice corner without any cutting. So again, because we have 2 lines of stitching, we're going to fold this top one over first, and I want to fold it in the same way I folded the other corner on. And then we're going to fold this back, and then we'll stick our thumb in there and our finger, and then go ahead and turn it. Get that last little bit out. So I'm going to take this over to the iron and I'm going to press it. When I do that, I'm also going to fold this seam allowance up about 1/2 inch and press that as well. And that way when we stitch, it'll be easier because all that will be folded under. I have the pocket pressed, and see we have 2 little slip pockets in this big zip, or in this bigger slip pocket. It's kind of cool. So I'm going to top stitch along the top of the upper pocket now. And then we're going to take one of our lining pieces and we're going to measure from the bottom and center this right on top. Go ahead and put my holders on here, my So Tight magnets. And now I'm going to stitch down, over, and up this pocket to stitch it on. as we stitch the bottom, we'll be closing the pocket. And there we have our slip pocket completed. So let's work on the zipper pocket. You can take your zipper pocket pieces, which is L and M, and you're going to take your zipper. Burn these edges here. We're going to place the zipper with the wrong side down on top of the right side of one of these pocket pieces. I'm going to clip, and then we're going to stitch. From here, you're going to open up this zipper, and you want to make sure the zipper tape is laying flat, and we're going to top stitch. Here, we're going to take the wrong side of the zipper and lay it on the right side of the other pocket piece. And we're going to stitch. And then we're going to do the same thing. We're going to lay that zipper tape nice and flat, and we're going to top stitch. Now, the longer piece of pocket is the top of the pocket. So essentially what's going to happen is once we sew it in, these two bottom edges will match. So depending on how you want your zipper to open, you're going to put the pull on. I want my zipper to close towards the left. So therefore I'm going to attach it to the right hand side so that it pulls close to the left. Now, if you are not using zipper by the yard, you'll just make sure that you lay your zipper on the pieces accordingly, depending on how you want it to close. And if it doesn't matter, then it's not a big deal. All right, so we're going to set this aside for just a minute, and we're going to take our other lining piece. Now, I'm using a zipper overlay here, so if you are not, you will have a zipper facing that you will stitch on this bag, and you will turn to the wrong side. Since I have an overlay piece, I'm just going to stitch this on, and you are going to measure from the top this time And before I do that, I'm going to put some double-sided tape on here. I know where my center of my lining piece is from the crease. I'm just going to find the center of my overlay by just kind of doing a little pinch right there. I'll line that up. And then I'm going to line this up even with the measurement. And come on this side. Now your measurement is from this top part of the bag, not the bottom V, but the top part. And certainly, you know, don't pull on this, just kind of lay it down. And once you get the top on, or one part on, usually the other section just kind of lays naturally where it needs to. Okay, so I'm going to stitch around the outside of this piece. My thread is a really good match for this leather. And it is, let me tell you what color it is, 3125. It is the Nylon Tech 70 Amman thread, the bonded nylon. So if you get this leather, this cobalt colored leather, that is the perfect match, thread match color. Okay, I'm just going to cut the center out of this zipper, and you don't have to be neat. Don't try to match it up with the very edge of the zipper overlay. You're just trying to get it out of the way so you don't see it from the front. Okay, so there's our back. And our front looks beautiful. So we're going to put our zipper pocket in now. So take some 1/4 inch double-sided tape. I lay it right along the edge of the zipper tape, both at the top and the bottom. And then I'm going to peel the backing off the tape and center the zipper. Making sure my pull is going towards the left. So not only am I centering it top to bottom, I also want to center it right to left. And sometimes this is easier said than done. Let's see. Just keep adjusting until you get it the way you like it. And now we're going to stitch around the inside rectangle. Make sure your zipper pocket is open in the back. Otherwise you will stitch your zipper pocket closed. Because the thread is such an exact match, I didn't have a problem back stitching. Can't even tell. Alright, so from here, we're going to pull this upper piece down. You'll see that the bottoms match perfect. And put some clips. And when we stitch, we're going to leave the bottom open. Now, one suggestion you can do is go ahead and stitch or iron the seam allowance in. And then also, once you iron it, you can stitch it in as well. So I'm going to just kind of finger press this. And this will just kind of help in the end know where to stitch. So again, we're not stitching the bottom. We're just going to stitch the tops. And when you do it, you want to flip this over to the right side and pull this back and then go ahead and stitch down. Make sure you back stitch really well at the bottom and at the top. And we'll repeat for this other side. And now our pocket is open, returning. And there's our zipper pocket. Okay, the next step is to install magnetic snaps. That's how the bag closes. So I went ahead and put them on this piece, and whenever you put your magnetic snaps on, you want to go ahead and use a little Peltex or Decaville Heavy on the back of these so that the snap doesn't pull through. So to measure, you're going to measure down. She gives you these measurements in the pattern, and just going to draw a line here and here. And then from this point, you're also going to measure out for the width of these. So basically where the intersection is where the center of the snap is going to go. So I'm just going to place my backing on and make 2 more lines. Go ahead and cut my holes. I think I need a new blade. This one seems to be a little dull. Go ahead and put your snaps on. And it really doesn't matter which side the male and or female side goes on, as long as you put, obviously, the same ones on the same side. So I try not to make my holes too big. I'd rather have to go back and cut them a little more if I need to, or really push them in. And that way they're nice and tight. So at this point is when you want to put the Decaville on, or Peltex, whatever it is you're going to use. So you just slide them on the back. You need to put the backing on. Now I always, after I push this down, I always take a little hammer and just hammer that down just to make sure it's nice and secure. Go ahead and put that on. I always keep my scraps of Decaville heavy because I use them all the time. Okay, so I'm just going to take a hammer and just hammer these down to make sure they're nice and secure, and then our snaps are on. At this point, the instructions or what you need to do to finish the bag is exactly the same way we finished the exterior. I'm going to sew my bottom on, and then I'm going to take my side pieces and stitch these together here, these little pleats. From there, I'm going to stitch the sides to the bag exactly the same way as we did before. So I'm going to do all that and then we'll come back. We have the lining complete. I'm going to cut back the seam allowances, but I'm not going to cut it back here at the top because I want to be able to open this seam when I stitch it all together. So I'm going to start, just maybe about 1.5 inches down and trim the seam allowances all the way around. And I'm trimming them to about 1/4 inch. Now, when you sew your lining together, you do want to take a slightly larger seam allowance because you don't want a bulky or baggy lining. So I'm just going to go ahead and cut, and when I get to the top up here, I'm just going to veer off. Do the same thing with this one. And it is really helpful to cut back seam allowances around curves, especially. Okay, so from here, we're going to stick the bag inside. Now, if you have a specific way you like to have your bag set up, or maybe you always want your zipper pocket in the back, make sure that you kind of pay attention to what you're doing here. Put it in the right way. Now the bag is smaller at the bottom than it is at the top, so it really fits fairly nice. Although the lining is smaller because I took a larger seam allowance, so we are going to have to stuff it down in here some. You always want to start at the sides or at some kind of seam. So I'm going to start here at the side seams. I'm just going to open these up and clip. I'm going to go around to the other side and do the same thing, and see, I'm probably going to need to smush my bag down in there some. So open the seam allowances. We are going to be pulling the bag through that zipper pocket. You could have left an opening in the bottom, but remember the bottom is a lot narrower than the top, so it wouldn't have made a huge difference between that and pulling it through the zipper pocket. Okay, I'm kind of doing this crooked. I'm going to pull the bag closer to me and go ahead and clip everything, making sure everything aligns, and then we will come back and we will sew it. The bag is clipped, everything lined up nicely, and I'm going to go ahead and stitch. Now, the bag itself, the inside, is going to want to pull away from the lining just because it's larger, it's got some stabilizer on it, and it doesn't really want to stay. So what I'm going to do is actually stitch it from the lining side, because this is a big enough opening I can do that. If you have a cylinder arm, you could certainly stitch it on that. But I'm going to use a 1/2 inch seam allowance, and I'm just going to push this inside in as I stitch so I can make sure that my lining and my main bag match up, because if they don't, I'll be able to adjust as I go. So I'm going to kind of give it an extra pull here and just go ahead and start stitching. I'm going to start from one of these pointed edges here. So I'm coming to one of these other pointed edges. I'm going to turn and stitch down. One more stitch here. And actually, I'm going to tell you what. I'm just going to stop there. I'm going to stitch the other side, and then we'll do those pointed edges from the inside. That'll be a lot easier. So now that it's stitched all around the edges, cut my threads, and we will now stitch down the points. I am going to make sure that I'm stitching from the inside, okay? And again, make sure that I top stitch as I come down. I say top stitch, I'm sorry, back stitch. As I come down, I'm going to back stitch a couple times, turn and back stitch a couple times so that I can make sure I get it nice and secure in that point. We're going to cut down to the point when we're done, and we want to make sure we've got a lot of strength there. So I'm going to sew this with the right side of the bag up now, or the exterior, I should say, up. Okay, so that's one done, and I can see here that I have an extra stitch. That's going to cause me problems when I go to cut. So I'm going to restitch down a little bit further so that I connect with that point. It was hard for me to tell on this side because my thread's the same color. And that's going to be where we want to start from. So I'm going to push this bag back in this way so I can stitch it from the lining and see where that's going to be. I'm going to make sure the rest of my bag is out of the way. And I want to come exactly to that point and do not go beyond it. Perfect, right there. Do a little back stitch. So now you can see that that point is lined up exactly perfect, and now when we cut down, we can cut down to the point and then it should open nicely. If we have that extra stitch in there, this extra stitch right here, beyond this line of stitching, when we went to go to turn it, it wouldn't line up right. We'd see it, it'd pull, it wouldn't lay flat. So you always want to make sure you stop and turn or connect your stitches just like this second line here is. Okay. So let's turn and do the same thing. So I'm going to make sure everything's lined up. My bag's in there good. And I might even try to do this one from the lining side so I can see it. And put some stronger clips to hold it. And let me try to do that. So I'm going to do it from the lining side. First, I'm going to turn and make sure I have the right distance, which it looks like I do. Actually, no, I can take another stitch. Okay, now let me turn. And all I'm trying to do is make sure that these triangles are lined up perfectly, because it's going to be, you know, obviously kind of the feature of this bag. And I want to make sure they look good. Okay, so now that I have the point done correctly and I turned and it looks nice, I'm going to go back and just do a couple of stitches on top to kind of give it a reinforcement. And I'm going to do that from the lining side, or this side here, so that I can see the stitches. Make sure the rest of the bag is out of the way. Okay. Make sure I'm right on point, and then come back and do a few stitches this way. Alright, so now I have a nice little top stitch done, or not top stitch, back stitch, reinforcement stitch, whatever it is you want to call it there, so that when we cut down to the stitching, there won't be any problems. You can just see that double stitching there. So from here we want to turn the bag. So go ahead and clip down to the stitching. And I'm also going to clip these seam allowances. Okay, you want to clip the seam allowances here in the corners because you want these corners to turn nicely as well. And I am going to just give it a little shave this way as well. Okay, same thing here. And then we're going to do exactly the same thing on this side. Go ahead and clip down to our stitching. Let's trim these back. And then we're going to trim this edge as well. So from here, we're going to reach in and I got to open my zipper pocket. I didn't leave it open. And now we're going to pull the bag through. So I'm going to do this off camera, get it all pulled through, and we'll come back. So as you turn this, you want to make sure that your corners are poked out nicely. And when you put your lining inside your bag, that you have a nice edge here, that there's no pulling or tugging here in the corner. And if you did like I showed you, you should be okay. So I'm going to go ahead and make sure the lining, well, there's no upper lining to this bag, so make sure that the lining is pushed in and is actually towards the back just a little bit so we don't see it peeking through. So I'm going to push the lining inside the bag. And then go around and clip all the way around, making sure that this lining is to the back. So as I top stitch, I am going to be tugging on my lining a little bit as well. That will help it kind of make sure that it is towards the back. Especially in this V area. Okay, so from here I am going to top stitch. So if you have a cylinder arm machine, you can certainly do it there. It'd be easier. If you don't, it's definitely a large enough bag, a large enough opening that you can top stitch at the flat bed. You just need to push your bag inside like this, hold it up, and top stitch. So I will do that to show you. I am going to start at the side though. So starting at this side seam here, I'm going to go ahead and start stitching. Now stitching down in the V, you're going to have to kind of hold your bag up straight here. Make sure that lining is going towards the back. And this is a good reason to use foam in the bag too, instead of Decago. You'll be able to swish it down easier. Okay, I'll turn, try to get that lining to the back. As much as possible. Okay, continue on straight. Here at the side seams, be careful that you don't, your foot doesn't drag. Put a piece there just to be safe. Alright, we got one more V. Work to get that lining to the back. And then we're going to turn, and once again, get that lining to the back. So from here, everything is top stitched. There's our front with our pocket, and we're going to need to iron this when we're done. But I'm going to take my zipper pocket out, and we already have the seam allowance pressed and turned under. So I'm just going to clip. I'm going to clip some of this seam allowance out. And now we'll go ahead and stitch. We're just stitching this pocket closed. All right, you can put your zipper pocket back in. Poke the corners down really good. Zip that up. And now we get to install grommets. Let me peel the backing off this and make sure these match up good. And we do. Okay, grommets. We need to measure on the side. We're going to be measuring from each side seam over, and then we're going to measure down as well. So let's see. You want to lay it as flat as possible. And I'm going to measure from the side seam first. I'm going to go right about here. So side seam and so I placed the one measurement on the side seam and the other one from the top. So now I have two dots here where the center of the grommets are going to go. You have two grommets per side. I'm going to do the same markings over here. Okay, so from here, we are going to use a hole punch to punch our grommets, our holes for our grommets. They are usually, the ones that I carry are 1/2 inch grommets, and they are really cool because they are the pressed together kind. You'll see, we're going to do this together. We'll put this up through, put this on top, and you're just going to hit it with a mallet and it'll press right in and you'll be done. So first thing we want to do is to punch the holes for this. So let me show you how to do that. So there are two different ways. You can get a hole punch from Tandy Leather or Springfield Leather or someplace like that and use this to punch the holes. This is a 1/2 inch. Or in those shape cutter kits that you get from Amazon, you also have a 1/2 inch shape cutter. Okay, so you can use either one of these, doesn't matter which one. So I'm going to take and line this up along the center, and I've got some old stuff in here. Let me punch that out so I can see where the center is. So I'm going to look through this hole and just make sure that I'm roughly in the center, and then just hit it. Okay, that didn't quite go through my lining. Now, whenever you do this, you really want to have a granite slab underneath. I didn't want to carry that over here, but typically that's what I would have, and it cuts through a lot better. it's not cutting through the lining. Let's see. There we go. So my lining is being a little stubborn, but I can see here where the hole is. So let me just go ahead and clip that back. Okay, so now I have a nice perfect hole for my grommet to go in. I'm going to take the side of the grommet with the taller wall and stick it in from the right side. Okay, I'm going to take the grommet with the smaller side and stick it right on top. And I'm going to just give it a little press, just so it kind of holds. From there, and you can cover this so you don't damage it, but you're just going to hammer it in, press it down a little better. Okay, and now it's installed. And you'll know when you have it all the way in, you're going to see the wall, that long, tall wall, be about the same height as the back of the grommet. Okay? And just like that, the grommet's installed. No screws, nothing. It's super easy. You don't need to press. You just need to hammer it a little bit and you're good to go. So I'm going to put the rest of the grommets in. I'm going to take this over to my slab so that it cuts a little easier, and then we will return. Once the grommets are installed, we then need to add our gate ring. And this is sometimes called the gate ring or spring ring, and it's basically an O-ring that's got a little hinge on it so you can open it up. You're going to take your grommets and put the side of the bag right sides together so that you can line up the grommets. Then you're going to put the ring in just like that. Okay? Now, depending on how big your gate rings are, may depend on how deep you put your grommets. So if your gate ring is smaller or you want it to have more space, you're going to take the grommets and when you install them closer to the top of the bag. Otherwise, you can get just a larger gate ring if you prefer. So this will snap together. We will put our crossbody strap on the gate ring. So basically, it's a dual purpose. It pulls the bag in together and also serves as our crossbody holder. All right, so from here, I'm going to install the handles, and I'm going to do that just by putting the handle in and securing it with rivets. Okay, so I'm going to do that, and we'll take a look at the bag. All right, here it is. The Vespera Bag by RLR Creations. It is a cute bag. You've got a nice crossbody strap. Of course, you have handles. You have this really amazing hidden pocket. You know, I love hidden pockets, right? So neat. I did this quilting on the front, which is not part of the pattern, but I did show you how to do that. And I did that because I decided to use solid on both sides. This bag kind of calls for a contrasting front, but I wanted to see what it would look like in the solid. So I thought this came out really good. The inside, you've got magnetic snaps holding it together. And then on one side, we have a zipper pocket. And on the other side, we have kind of a double slip pocket and then another slip pocket on top of that. So it's really very neat how she put that together. So I'm going to link the pattern below. The Vespera Bag by RLR Creations. And until next time, everybody, happy sewing.